Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Yeah.
Yes, please.
My name is Mugisha, and I'm going to be a panelist for this round. Thank you.
All right. So we have two judges here. So I'm going to just to make sure that we are all having the same motion, right? So the motion that we are going to debate for this Octo finals is: this house believes that it is morally unjust for environmental movements to support eco-terrorism in response to continued environmental degradation caused by corporations in all instances. So assuming that we all have this motion, I'm going to call on the affirmative team, the first speaker. You come, you introduce yourself, you mention your name and your role, and then you count down from 3, 2, 1, and then you start. Panelists, could someone help me with a timer? Ima or Titus, if one of you could help me do the timing, I'd be very grateful.
Okay, I will do the timing.
All right. So if a speaker comes, mention your name, your role, and then count down from 3, 2, 1 before you start, so that we can start your timer in that particular order. Without any further ado, the first speaker for the affirmative. Here.
Okay. I just want to confirm that I'm audible, that everyone can hear me.
Yeah, you are audible enough.
Before I begin, just shout out to my team. I'm very, very grateful that we have operated with each other thus far, and I'm really, really grateful. In case the opposition has a POI, you can just type it in the chat and just unmute yourself and speak. If there's nothing further, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, panel, we are faced with a very unique reality as to what encompasses the move for environmental sustainability and change in the status quo, and the narrative that has continued to be pushed of having corporations continuously degrade the environment through, things like COP28 that we've seen in Dubai this year. Now, panel, the only problem that we want to posit with eco-terrorism, even before I continue, is just a 4-part model. 1, we will prove to you why eco-terrorism is violent in all instances, and purely on base premise of that, it becomes uniquely morally unjustified. 2, we will tell you why, even in their best case, eco-terrorism is less likely to work or accrue the said benefits that they want it to accrue. Thirdly, we'll then tell you why, even at a point in time where eco-terrorism becomes the norm, it would have a more net negative impact as to a net positive impact. But then lastly, and more importantly, on our side of the bench, we'll then give you a counterfactual to eco-terrorism and why we think that that is the best thing to run in promoting environmental sustainability. Now, two parts of this model then. 1 is what exactly makes something morally justified, and this looks like 4 unique things. 1, context and circumstances. So in this case, the context is that environmental degradation has been continuous. So that means that there's already the methods that are already being used to solve this become uniquely ineffective. But then secondly, on terms of circumstances, we're living in a time where these environmental activists are frustrated and they want change. But panel, we then show you why they want change by any means necessary. Secondly, ethical principle, which just looks like 3 things. 1, the concept of fairness. 2, justice. But even thirdly, a moral framework that expels any maleficence in status quo. So we'll prove to you why you don't achieve that on negative side, because we tell you that they are more likely to be maleficent regardless of that. Thirdly is the intention. So panel, we need to concede to the fact that both sides have a passion. They want environmental sustainability and they want this change. But panel, we want to tell you why we are willing to run the case of eco-terrorism that is extremist by any means necessary, and that they achieve the passion of change. Yes, even if they run the case of urgency and necessity, and we've not been able to solve these problems in status quo, so therefore we feel the need to push for eco-terrorism. That kind of will be watered down in my substantive, where I tell you that the intention does not accrue the said benefits. Okay, panel. First and foremost, why do we think that regardless of these like with these principles of moral justification, why we think that team negative is morally unjustified on all those principles? Panel, we tell you that one, at the point in time where you want to pursue violence, regardless of the incentive, we then say that the means justifies the end, regardless of anything that negative may push. But even if we take them at their best and we say that eco-terrorism is the way to go, we then tell you that one, it is highly unlikely because stakeholders of these companies are more likely to just wait it out and say, okay, you're not affecting my money, so we're going to let you fight on the roads, we're going to let you vandalize property, and then you'll get tired at some point and then you'll just buy out. Secondly, we then tell you that the impact that you get, where at the point in time it becomes detrimental to society, you're more likely to then face public backlash in that regard. So there'd be stakeholder retaliation in that essence. But even thirdly and more importantly, we then tell you that you don't solve the problem because one, they're more likely to find alternatives to do what they want to do in terms of profit incentive anyway. But then thirdly and more importantly, we then feel that regardless of the incentive of wanting to have environmental sustainability, people in status quo are less likely to risk their lives much as they want change. So we think that this would be very counterproductive in status quo. Now, two things on ethical principle. One is is just how differentiated views are and why we think that the whole concept of eco-terrorism undermines the legitimacy of what exactly activism is supposed to encompass. Because panel, we posit to you two things. One, we tell you that activism in and of itself is direct, vigorous action rather, which is non-violent, and we think that you then have capacity to make an impact at the point in time where you're achieving peace. But panel, we then tell you that everyone wants to achieve this goal, but at a point in time where you want to push for eco-terrorism, and it becomes uniquely problematic at the point in time where you're not only facing public backlash, because no one wants to exist in a world where these stakeholders who have more money than you, who have more resources than you, who have more connections than you, are pushing back at you because you're actively destroying their companies and stuff like that. We find that uniquely problematic. But then thirdly and more importantly, why then do we feel on side proposition that we then give you alternatives that work? We posit to you three things. We posit to you three criteria, and that is one, the whole concept of negotiation and diplomacy. But then secondly and more importantly, we then tell you that all these other non-violent methods such as civic education and the sort are then more sustainable and peaceful because of three important things. One, you then achieve mutual satisfaction in two regards. One, you then get a sense of agreement at the point in time where we say, okay, this is what we've been doing. This is the problem that we have with what you've been doing. And thirdly, this is what we're likely to do with, this is what we're likely to do in response to that. And because of that, we then think that that is uniquely effective, because even if negative comes and runs and says, oh, stakeholders don't have the incentive, or stakeholders don't want to, solve this problem, we find that case uniquely problematic in and of itself, because they are then more incentivized to actually solve the problems or find environmentally sustainable ways to actually fix the problem. Why? Because they don't face backlash at the point in time where they go against their word. But then secondly, they're more incentivized to actually do that for fear of falling back. Secondly, problem solving, which looks like giving opportunities and perspective. Why? Because we think that at a point in time where you pursue eco-terrorism, we think that eco-terrorism in and of itself, due to its sheer nature that exists in three key respects, that is individual acts of sabotage, but also community initiative to then have direct damage. So things like arson, things like vandalism, things like extremism. So panel, we think that all those just at base premise level are morally unjustified. But panel, even thirdly, it looks like the preservation of relationships. Why? Because in our world, we don't value a world whereby we're going to more likely have things like animosity and damage, which are things that we think you get from team negative. Because at a point in time where they can prove to us that eco-terrorism, because panel, the only way we're going to debate this is at a point in time where team negative can prove to us two things. One, eco-terrorism is less likely to result in violence by any means necessary, and it's likely to create the change that they want to see. But then secondly, and more importantly, they also have to prove to us that they have the capacity to not only accrue the benefits that they supposedly want to argue for in terms of eco-terrorism, but then secondly and more importantly, that they have the capacity to retain their movement and not fall out of it due to outside pressure. And I think my second speaker will then come and tell you expand on our alternatives, and my third speaker will then do a comparative way up on why we think that it is not only morally unjustified, but it's also principally and pragmatic to run the case of eco-terrorism, and why we think under any circumstances, regardless of the problem at hand, regardless of the incentive and the want to push for change, we think that that form of change would then spiral back and become counterproductive in status quo. With that, I rest my case. Thank you very much.
All right, we thank the first speaker of the affirmative for that fine speech. We then welcome the first speaker of the negative to come and give us and open the case of the opposition. Here. So you mention your name, your role, and then you count down from 3 to 1, and then you go. Anytime you are not audible, I'll let you know.
Okay, Chair, am I audible?
Yes, please. You are audible. I'll let you know anytime you are not.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm going to set my timer. Okay, so my name is Samrawit and I'm the first opposition speaker. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. We live in a world where voices of many environmental activists have ended in discussion rooms. Corporations have continued to recklessly degrade the environment, having a only rigid mindset towards only profit and leaving a world or Mother Earth to people with crisis. Chair, understanding the problem in current status quo is that people have continued to talk about how degradation has actually affected, right? We come and show you how environment has actually kept on being polluted by such corporations, such as pollution, such as they keep on using the environment recklessly and overexploitation of the environment. Who is actually being affected? Society is being affected in a way that people are displaced for these corporations. People are having respiratory diseases because of extreme pollution. People are actually having crisis in their lives because environment is actually being affected. We see heat waves. We see, effects that come about due to environmental degradation, such as floods and all that. So, Chair, with that, we see that people are going to actually keep on dying, and the environment at the end of the day will actually not exist from their side of the house, where they say that the only thing they actually think is that negotiation and diplomacy. We come and tell you that for so long, years and years, since the 1900s, there's been always negotiation and diplomacy towards these companies to actually stop this, degradation and actually stop environmental pollution. But we have to understand that the nature of these corporations are actually profit incentive. What does that mean? Is that they're going to do anything to get profits, even though at the expense of the environment, and that is how literally their nature is. And that is why we don't think negotiation and diplomacy can no longer work, and that is why we believe as team opposition the environmental eco-terrorism is actually morally justified. Things I'm going to do in my first speech. One, I'm going to show you why it's actually not. I'm going to do a little engagement of affirmative states, but then two, I'm going to show you why we think as team opposition it's actually morally justified for these environmental movements to support eco-terrorism. My second speaker is going to come and do extensive argumentation and do comparatives, and then lastly, my third speaker is going to come ahead, analyze where and show you why we win this particular debate. First and foremost, what do they come and tell us? They come and tell us that stakeholder retaliation is going to work. Chair, at a point in time whereby there are 3 companies that are degrading the environment day and night towards 10,000 people who are actually serving the consequences for such of their acts, who is going to actually be retaliated, is that there's not even existence of stakeholder retaliation, right? We actually think from our side of the house, we don't have stakeholder retaliation. What does that mean? It means that at a point in time, once we actually go ahead with eco-terrorism, it means that we are actually forcing these people to the wall to stop and curb environmental degradation that they put in society. At a point in time, society in and itself is tired of environmental degradation that these companies or corporations are actually going. So that is why we think it is actually for the benefit of society, for women, for children, for each and everyone at the end of the day, that their environment is safe and their environment is at good hands. But then two, they come and tell us that negotiation and diplomacy is actually the way to go. Chair, we show that for so long, environment talks have actually been there, right? At a point in time, even a minister you've been talking to about environment is the same person who is going to go and actually ban bushes, is the same person who is going to actually pollute the environment by throwing plastics. That is the government we work in. Two, you have to understand, Chair, that in a
Right.
society we live in where failed legal, I will take you later, where there is failed legal frameworks, it means that at a point in time, even though these companies, like for example, even though you're going to sue them or file them, they'll actually have the money. We show you that their nature is actually profit incentive. At a point in time, if we don't actually force them or even like destroy their properties to show them that enough is enough, it means that even these companies at the end of the day do have the money. Even though you file and sue them, they have the money to actually win and get best attorneys. And that is why we show you in a system where there is actually failed legal frameworks, we don't think negotiation or diplomacy or even filing and suing them doesn't work. We think force has to be put and enough is enough. What do they come and tell us? They come and tell us that, arson and vandalism is actually morally unjustified. Okay, so that in their world, it means that my family is dead because of your environmental degradation is justified. That is the world they live in, right? So at a point in time, if we talk, we literally don't want to, to actually have, vandalism or arson. We also don't want destruction. But at a point, if we talk and no one is listening, eco-terrorists are actually frustrated. They've given you policies, they've given you practices for government to initiate and probably save environment, and government is not doing them, and then probably we have these corporations that keep on doing it. We think that arson and vandalism is the way to go, and we think with that we think we're going to actually have better initiatives. And at a point in time, once you push them to the wall, we think we're going to solve this. I'll take your PI.
Don't you think it's more likely for these companies that continuously degrade the environment to then buy out and transfer the problem elsewhere at the point in time where you vandalize and just destroy their companies at that point?
So they tell us that these companies are going to go ahead and shift. Chair, at a point in time, if one person understands this and eco-terrorism has been actually the way, and we show you that there is going to be a solution, and at a point in time, we're going to see that these corporations are going to stop whatever they are doing or trying to curb their environmental pollution. Trust me, other corporations, in order to avoid such incidents, I'm very sure that these corporations in and itself, they're going to actually go ahead and curb it. What does that mean? It shows you that there is even this whole sort of deterrence mechanism at the end of the day. Once we do that to some corporations, then definitely other corporations, in order for them to actually not, face such incidents, we think at the end of the day, they will actually stop it. So what do we run through opposition case? We'll tell you that it's actually morally justified, and we'll show you that there is urgency and necessity. We'll show you that environmental degradation for so long has actually been unbearable. We'll show you the consequences of this environmental degradation. We'll tell you there is death of people continuous because the environment is degraded. And that is why we'll tell you that due to the environmental depression and global inaction, we show you that there are failed legal frameworks from these corporations. At a point in time, we don't think negotiation and diplomacy will work in and itself, right? But then secondly, we tell you that due to the urgency we actually need, and we tell you that due to the failure of these people engaging themselves in actually to cut this environmental degradation, at a point in time, we don't think peace is going to work. We need force in order to actually put ourselves at the forefront to end environmental sustainability. And that is why, Chair, as our front or as our stance as team opposition, we want environmental sustainability. And this is going to come by force if corporations have actually refused. And that is why we think eco-terrorism as an act of violence committed in support of environmental causes, these corporations continue to affect the environment and even bring degradation. And that is why we think it's very morally justified, because you're literally affecting society at the end of the day. We want benefits of society. We want to stand with society. And I think our actions are going to actually lead to a better society. How is that going to happen? At a point in time, once you have eco-terrorism and destroying their stuff, it means that these corporations are going to go ahead and have a step back and say that indeed these people have actually raised their voice and have put us to the wall. And this is why we think we should actually curb our pollution. They're going to find mechanisms on how to do that. What happens is that the society at the end of the day is actually able to actually live in a sustainable world. But then secondly, it's actually morally justified from our side of the house, because we have the moral responsibility for future generations. We can't live in a world, we can't leave the earth to the future generations where we just keep on, we have a polluted world and all that. It is us, the environmentalists, to make sure that our future generations are in safe hand. And that is going to be extended in our second speech, the moral responsibility towards future generations. But so, Chair, from our side of the house, we show you why it's urgent and very necessary. We show you that, we explain to you how environmental degradation is actually a killer. We show you how negotiation and diplomacy for so long has not worked. We show you that stakeholder retaliation does not exist, because it's going to benefit the society at the end of the day. And where peace fails, force is going to apply to actually bring the whole social deterrence, and at the end of the day, save Mother Earth. And with that, we think it's going to be an opposition win. Beg to submit.
All right, we thank the first speaker of the opposition for opening the cases for opposition. We then welcome the second speaker of the affirmative to continue the cases of the affirmative. Here. So you state your name, your role, and you count down to 3 and you start.
Okay, I would like to confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, please, you are audible. I'll let you know at the point in time where you are not.
Fine. Nambaale Trevor, I will be doing second speech on the side of affirmative, and I will be taking POIs in my 4th minute onwards, and I please beg that any person with a POI just kindly go ahead, unmute and speak up, and I will be able to reply. Okay, fine. Chair, I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, when we go ahead as team proposition and our first speaker inherently goes and tells you that the kinds of harms that are coming about in team opposition does not reply so efficiently and effectively to the kinds of harms that we present to them, Chair. We need to realize there is actually a kind of urgency within society to actually keep these companies present, because we all do accept that most of our economy is based on these kinds of factories, and much as there is the trade-off of us having environmental damage, we then believe that them staying in them perpetuating their work is also beneficial to society, because, Chair, we don't believe that environmental eco-terrorism is significant enough a trade-off for the other services that these companies do provide. And much as they do these things on profit drive, we then believe that there are also other inherent benefits that they have on society, i.e., with those things that they provide to us in society that I'm not going to inherently mention, but we already do know them within the fields of medicine, technology, and such, which we believe that all these things are inherently even more significant at this point in time, Chair. But when they go ahead and present something so extremist, we then believe that it's going to collapse on itself. But, Chair, let us all first go back to status quo. Chair, we can all acknowledge and we all do accept that within past systems, or rather within the past, we do acknowledge and we do accept that maybe negotiations have been inefficient. But, Chair, we do believe so, because we believe that within the past, the channels have actually been messed up and have actually been one-sided. Why do we say so? We believe that whenever these channels or rather these kinds of negotiations were actually happening, we believe that they were actually there was a point in time whereby one person's interest was being championed, and there were not enough trade-offs to actually see the kinds of results that we wanted at the end of the day. So we then believe that as team of proposition, that we believe that there is actually what we then need to do as team proposition is to champion a kind of system whereby both sides are given equal stances and no one's interests are championed over the other. We believe that the environment is inherently something important, but we also all have to acknowledge that the service that these companies actually have to offer to us are inherently more important. But also, secondly, Chair, we also need to realize that there's a kind of hypocrisy that comes about in team opposition's end of the world. But before I continue, I'll take a POI.
So does it mean that the existence of these corporations, just because they give you importance, you're going to let thousands of people die because of the environmental degradation? Is that what you clearly mean? So it means that it's not actually urgent?
Imagine a kind of world whereby these factories were actually put out of work. How many people would die because of a lack of medicine, because of a lack of services that are important to the people? We then believe that in this world, on a comparative analysis, we then believe that a world whereby these corporations are not working at all then becomes more harmful to the society at the end of the day. We believe that much as there is harm in the current world, we then believe that a world whereby these corporations do not work is inherently more harmful not only to society but to the economy. We're going to put ourselves in a scenario whereby we're going to be in a kind of financial crisis, but also secondly, we're going to find people dying, and probably actually going to have a lot of backlash at the end of the day because the people themselves actually champion these kinds of systems. Secondly, Chair, as I move on to our argumentation, Chair, we believe that at the end of the day, what should be done in status quo is we should champion this kind of system whereby we are championing sustainability and subsidization into the environmental sustainability. How, Chair, we believe that if these companies continue, at the end of the day, we also realize that we also do acknowledge the urgency at the end of the day, and with these kinds of new new diplomatic negotiations whereby we're championing both interests at the end of the day, whereby we're having eco basis. We then believe that slowly by slowly we could be able to technologically bring up the kind of better ecology that we need at the end of the day in comparison to their end of the world, whereby they believe we should stop all kinds of development, all kinds of progress on the account that the environment is being destroyed. Yes, yeah, we do acknowledge that environment is something key and important to the society, but we also do acknowledge that these companies are something that is inherently very, very important to society. So, yeah, what we then believe, yeah, we believe that on their end of the world, this is where our argumentation comes in, is that the extremist nature that they champion for, one, is very, very hypocritical. How, yeah? These are the very people that tell us that environment is something very important, but the ways in which they plan to show that is through destroying the environment itself. How? Yeah, we believe that eco-terrorism involves actions such as arson, which we believe also have a negative impact and therefore worsen the kind of society. Because if there are over 2,000 factories within a country and we are going ahead to ban all the 2,000 factories within that country, we then believe we're going to find ourselves in a scenario whereby the kind of pollution for that day alone beats all the pollution that has been there in the past because of the destruction of all the factories at the end of the day. That then means that at the end of the day, eco-terrorism is something that is very hypocritical and is inherently morally unjustified. And we believe that morality is something key in today's debate at the end of the day. And let's say show us how it's morally justified on accounts of urgency and on accounts of sustainability. They cannot win today's debate. But secondly, and most importantly, Chair, we also realize that if they're going ahead and actually destroying these corporations, the kind of impact it would have to the environment is also something that's significant and they should actually justify at the end of the day. Because, Chair, if they also accept at the end of the day, if they too are destroying the environment, that then means that they are hypocritical. That then means that on our end of the world, whereby we're going to have that kind of a better kind of sustainability, the kind of system that we present to you, we then believe that we are actually both justified and we're actually having a better world at the end of the day in comparison to them. But also secondly, secondly, in our argumentation, Chair, we also believe that the destruction on their end of the world would be perpetual. How? Chair, let's understand this. If I am going ahead and actually putting these companies that have been making profits out of business, these companies inherently, because of the kind of money that they have been making in the past, we then believe that they then have the kind of a mandate, or they have incentives to go ahead and actually subsidize or rather invest into other ways in which they could make money, of which these kinds of systems would also continue to destroy the environment besides the ones that already know. How, Chair? We believe that with the current kind of technology that exists within society, and because of the kind of incentives that these people are actually going to have at the end of the day, we then believe that then the system then becomes more liable to things like corruption and things like lack of transparency. At the end of the day, the environment will still be damaged. Because, Chair, we believe that the fact that these people have been making money in the past and still want to make money at the end of the day, they're then going to be driven into doing things in a shady kind of manner on their end of the world, meaning that at the end of the day, on their end of the house, pollution would continue, but nothing would inherently be done. We also have to realize the kinds of profits that they have been making would inherently also push them further to actually go ahead and subsidize into destroying all kinds of environmental action that have been existing today. Because we believe that the current politicians are some of the people who are deeply entrenched within these kinds of economies that generate this kind of pollution. I do believe these politicians are the very people who are supposed to go ahead and champion the kind of or the kind of environmental sustainability that is supposed to happen at the end of the day. But yeah, at the end of the day, if we go ahead and hamper the kinds of profits that these very politicians have been making, then you're not giving them any kind of incentive to go ahead and actually buy into the idea of environmental sustainability. Because yeah, much as we do acknowledge that there are issues within society, but we then also believe that those issues can be solved by these factories themselves by creating the kind of technology to defeat all the problems. Because we believe that at this point in time, Chair, with the kinds of information sharing and skill sharing within the current world, we then believe that issues like floods could actually easily be solved with technological advancements. And we also believe that the kind of technology the current world is subsidizing into, i.e., things like direct air capture, are things that are inherently benefiting the environment more, whereby we actually even have a chance on our end on actually reversing all the harms that have been done on the environment on our end of the house, in comparison to their end of the house, whereby they are not only inefficient and ineffective, but at the end of the day, Chair, we also believe that we are winning this debate on those metrics with that vote proposition.
I'd like to confirm if I'm audible,
Yes,
and
is it the
I'll be
second
starting
speaker?
my. Yeah, this is Kiragga Jed, second opposition speaker.
Is this the second speaker of opposition?
Yes,
Hello?
Kiragga Jed.
All right. Please, the name again.
Kiragga Jed.
All right, captured.
Okay, I'll begin my speech. 5, 4, 3, 2. But on what the second prop was trying to perpetuate. Second proposition speaker was talking about how these environmental companies are important to society. True, we concede to that fact. However, we also have a burden to show you that these companies are still causing a lot of the pollution that's happening in our society, and they should be held accountable for the pollution. Notice that on our side of opposition, we are not arguing against the existence of these companies. In fact, we encourage them to continue to be there and have their benefits within society. What we are arguing is that the impacts of their pollution should actually be addressed by the companies themselves. This does not mean that we're going to shut down the companies. It actually means that we're going to incentivize them to use more better alternatives that reduce the environmental impacts that they are causing. For example, proper sewage disposal and proper kinds of sources of electricity. That's what we are trying to advocate for. Now, notice that we have already told these companies to actually use renewable sources of energy and to improve the methods in which they dispose of their waste. However, there has been lack of effective action by these companies, and that's why we're showing that it's inherently justified for there to be an involvement of eco-terrorism to actually put these issues at the forefront. Now, on a bit of rebuttal and continuous engagement, they talked about how these companies can subsidize and continue their pollution. This is why actually this point comes more on our side because it shows you that these companies are inherently willing to avoid all sorts of forms of accountability, inherently showing you that's why it is justifiable for there to be actually acts of eco-terrorism because these people are willing to actually avoid any form of enforcement, inherently showing you how they're willing to avoid any form of accountability. Then they talked about the profit orientation of the company and how they would make efforts to avoid how they can would make an effort to avoid the environmental movement because of these incentives. These people are not incentivized to actually tackle the problem. Justifiable for eco-terrorism to put the impacts of their pollution at the
UI.
forefront because it inherently shows you that these companies are going to inherit of any form of accountability because they want to maximize profits, inherently showing that it's justifiable that these eco-terrorists bring these poor issues at the forefront because the companies are not willing to do so. Then they talked about how the companies don't have the capacity to remove their problems. Actually, they do have the capacity and they have the finances to do so. However, it will cost more money and it will also show the inefficiencies in their governance. This is why the companies actually avoid any form of accountability. I'll take your PY after the rebuttal. Then they talked about the moral justification of using violence. We find it inherently justifiable to use violence because it actually preserves future generations of society. It actually preserves the society as a whole. Then they talked about how it will actually cause public backlash. And we actually show you that this public backlash that is being caused by eco-terrorism is actually justifiable in the sense that even if it happens in our side, the public backlash is going to put the environmental issues that these companies are causing at the forefront. So people are going to be questioning the idea of why these people are actually resorting to all sorts of acts of destruction. If they start questioning it, they'll actually see why these eco-terrorists did what they did, and there will actually be more public support of eco-terrorists coming out and exposing the corrupt or the pollution practices of these companies. Then they talked about how it's counterproductive and undermines the legitimacy of activism. Notice that the eco-terrorism is actually an extreme that the society as a whole has actually been forced to encounter because my first speaker had clearly characterized to you how environmental talks and environmental engagement has been totally nullified and has not worked in our society. That is why it is inherently justifiable for these people to actually continue with these acts of eco-terrorism. So now moving on to the kind of burdens that we had in this debate. The major burden, okay, I'll take your POI.
Don't you think that eco-terrorism becomes counterproductive at the point in time where companies are down and people are more or less dying due to this violence and retaliation?
Notice that these companies are huge, have high flows of finances. Now, when there are acts of eco-terrorism on these companies, there might be some sort of some sort of like engagement with the public, because the public is seeing that people are actively attacking this company. Now, if the public sees that the company also doesn't want its image to be destroyed and is going to use the vast resources or the vast finances it has got by avoiding some sort of environmental like change within it, it has a lot of profits because of that. It's going to use those profits to actually improve itself. Now, moving to the form of argumentation that you're bringing to this debate. Notice that this eco-terrorism, when present, it's more justifiable because it creates a sort of deterrent. Now, if people are going to see that the company is going to actually face losses because we are not enforcing any form of environmental change within the company, then they're going to be incentivized to actually change themselves because one, they know that they are liable to attack by eco-terrorism, and two, they do not want any form of loss of profits in terms of the eco-terrorism attacks. Then moving on to the argumentation that my speaker was talking about was that like there's lack of action on the side of like any form of environmental action. So now the impact of the lack of action is
EOI.
that these companies are going to continue these corrupt practices, and when they continue to do so, they're going to damage the population in which they're trying to serve. So
EOI.
any impacts they try to bring on the development of the community is then going to be counteracted by the effects of the corruption that they are raising because of the pollution practices. Then moving on to some form of argumentation is that it's justifiable because it aligns with the principle for disobedience. Notice that in the past there have been acts and atrocities committed by government officials and people in power that have been actually ousted by some form of civil disobedience. Notice, for example, civil rights movements within America that actually had a form of like destruction of the society that actually incentivized people to change the ways in which they saw black people and racism in society. So
EOI.
the environmental eco-terrorists see themselves as a form of civil disobedience as they are actually trying to address the problems that are being affecting them. And as I continue my argumentation, when you see the impact of this civil disobedience, it actually causes one, it causes some sort of reaction from the public. Now, when the public reacts to certain issues, they're more incentivized to talk about them. Now, when they talk about their issues, they're going to be calls for action by these public companies or these corporations to actually address the problem. Now, before I continue to my weighing and impact analysis, I take your POI.
Okay. If you say these companies have the financial support and they inherently are profit driven, doesn't that then mean that they're going to kind of undermine your system and go ahead and do these things in the dark?
The fact is, they have already undermined current systems of talks and engagement. That is why it is justifiable to use eco-terrorism, because they cannot undermine the effects of eco-terrorism on their companies. Since they are profit incentivized and they are profit driven, if they see that they're incurring losses because some of their machinery is being destroyed, they're going to be incentivized to actually tackle the groups and actually tackle the issues that the eco-terrorists are bringing up onto them. So the inherent profit-minded nature of this company is going to incentivize them to take actions because of the actions of the eco-terrorists. So on the moral justification, we actually show you why it is moral justified because of the inaction and the impacts that this pollution is going to cause. We also show you why there is ineffectiveness of the current status quo, where dialogues and whatnot have failed to actually cause any sustainable change within the environment. Then we showed you how there is in need of urgency. The urgency of the problem inherently justifies why they need to actually address it as soon as possible. And we show you how eco-terrorists are able to bring more some sort of accountability and some sort of kind of addressing this issue more efficiently than what these people have talked about by raising the issues to public, raising the issues to the public. So now moving on to the last argument, which the speaker will clarify more on, was on the moral responsibility for future generation. You can argue that eco-terrorism is protecting the earth for future generations by actually causing havoc right now to incentivize people to change themselves. So now doing a quick impact analysis, show you on our side how one, it is justifiable for them to actually have acts of eco-terrorism because it brings a problem to the forefront. Public backlash or any form of like bringing these things to the public incentivizes people to actually do something about it, because acts of eco-terrorism are not easy to ignore as dialogues and whatnot. With that, I rest my case.
All right, we thank that speaker for that fine speech. We then welcome the third speaker of the team proposition to continue the cases for the prop bench. So you state your name and you count to 3, 2, 1, and start here.
My name is Sabiti Paul, and I'm the third speaker side proposition. I will be taking my POIs in the 5th minute onwards. Please do not budge. Just unmute your unmute yourself and set your wire, and I will come to you if necessary. So I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Now, Chair, let's actually take one thing into consideration from the beginning of today's debate. What side opposition why side opposition is actually moving forward eco-terrorism is because they believe that one, it is justified at the end of the day, and it's actually going to incentivize these companies to actually move forward and actually change. But let me actually show you why that inherently is actually not going to come out. And they have been trying to avoid this, and they've been trying to show us they have been trying to come up with assumptions or some sort of case to show us that it's actually going to go the way that they actually want it to go. But that inherently is actually not going to come about. Why? Because already come and told them that in instances when you actually go and use more violence towards a sort of company by banning their sort of materials, by banning their sort of companies, as the second speaker came here and clarified that they at the end of the day they want these companies to say, but at the end of the day they're also banning them. So that's something we really don't understand, how the companies at the end of the day is actually going to be able to continue when you're destroying their own sort of property. And already come and tell you that by the point in time when you're already forcing companies to actually look at ways on which they can actually survive, it's going to force them to one, look at two ways on which they can actually protect themselves from the harms of these activists at the end of the day. How? By themselves also using force against these sort of protesters, which is actually something that's actually negative and something that these environmental movements will not actually benefit them at the end of the day, which is actually not going to bring the change that side opposition wants at the end of the day. We also come and tell them that in whatever case or scenario as it is in status quo, even if you're actually to use enough force on these companies, the damage that you're already inflicting on them is already going to be enough for them not even to bring about any change or even able to actually change their ways of life. Because at the end of the day, you've already inflicted damage onto them, you already destroyed their property. So how do you expect them to actually change or reverse that sort of harms that they have already put into the environment? So even with that being said, already seeing that the effects of environmental degradation are still there and are not actually being changed or catered for at the end of the day. So we're seeing that side eco-terrorism is actually not being effective as the environmental movements wanted at the end of the day. But what we actually come and tell you, that we come and tell you that at the end of the day, what we believe is actually better is if we actually fix these channels on which we're actually going to be able to negotiate with these people or actually talk to them and actually help them understand the situation at hand. Because we believe that actually by by actually giving by actually fighting for violence in a sort of world at the end of the day is something that is not actually going to help any of the both parties. Because if you move onward forward with violence, not only are the environmental movements themselves and the people in themselves going to get damaged, they may also face other penalties such as being arrested or actually their movement themselves also being banned or closed, since it's already unjustified and illegal in society for them to commit such action. So even though we come and tell you that these companies themselves are already necessary in society, already contribute to society in a big way, we say that we inherently see it better for them to actually change their ways, but not by actually banning the companies or by attacking their property, by actually showing them a much more better way on which they can actually achieve this. And we see that our world is generally something that's not self-harming or where people are not actually getting harmed in any way, simply because we're already fronting for much more since we're already fronting for a much more harm-free environment where people are actually able to front their ideas or front their ideas with these companies. Because we believe there are actually much more better ways for this sort of movement to actually execute their sort of ideas into these companies with effectiveness. Now, we actually now to move on into the sort of case. Now to move on into a little bit more of rebuttal. Now, they come and tell us that they believe that our channels of negotiation have already been tried out in society. We already tell them that yes, we already recognize that problem, but we tell you that what a far more better way is actually to fix these sort of channels or to fix the channels to which these ideas are being reached to these companies. Because if at one point the channel had failed and if we fix it, doesn't that mean that the companies themselves are already going to be able to change their ways? That's something that they're not actually taking into consideration, and they clearly ignore that idea or they put it aside. Now, that is a sort of effectiveness that is actually not going to, or that's a sort of model that is actually not going to be effective. If the first cause of course to a solution, and a peaceful solution is violence, then how do we hope to save the environment that we all love if we continue banning it, or if we continue destroying and adding more harm to environment? We already see that already harm is already being inflicted onto the environment, and what they see as a solution to cater it for this is actually adding more violence. That is only that adding more violence. That is already going to add more fire, and it's already going to add more damage to the case. So even with that actually being said, Chair, we're already seeing that side proposition are already catering for this at the end of the day. So, Chair, even now that brings us to my next rebuttal, how the companies are going to react at the end of the day. Chair, one thing that side opposition takes into consideration is that they believe that the companies, after continuous attacks and so forth, that the companies are obviously now going to realize that they're doing something wrong and they're going to change their way of approach. But really come and tell them that is inherently a sort of mindset that we believe that is not going to come about. Because the truth is, when you go and punch someone in the face, he's not just going to stand there and just look at you and say, you know what, maybe I've done something wrong, that's why this person is punching me in the face. He's actually going to react violently, and that means that the companies themselves are already going to react violently towards these environmental movements, and are not actually going to be willing to listen to what they actually have to put on the table at the end of the day. And second of all, as my second and first speakers came here and tried to clarify to you, that means that the companies themselves are also going to find a better place or a better area to go, and they can continue the activities. So that means change has not actually been achieved in their world, aside opposition keeps trying to bring to us. And even with that actually being said, Chair, we're already seeing that they don't really cater for that. Now, Chair, to move on to one of the main clashes in today's debate was the sort of urgency. The clash of urgency, and Chair, we do realize the urgency of the problem, but why we are saying proposition actually win on this is one, because we realize the urgency of the problem, we believe that it is necessary to actually fix these channels and actually get peaceful and effective ways of bringing about change in these companies. Because one, we believe the companies are important in society and they're able to bring about the change much more effectively when they're there than when they're not there at all. So even with that being said, Chair, we see that we are having a much more better society simply because the companies are able to change themselves and they're able to impact the environment positively. And that is something that is eventually going to come about, regardless to when you actually achieve, when you inflict violence towards this company. And second, on the aspect of the justification and the morality aspect, we win on that because, Chair, we've already shown you how we do not actually bring about any sort of immoral activities or bring about any sort of unlawful activities that are generally going to be frowned upon on society. Because generally the people who occupy these environmental movements are generally people, or they are generally the youth. And if the youth themselves are being damaged, generally the parents are already going to have a bad, or generally adults in society are already going to have a bad review, or already a bad side of these sort of movements, are not actually going to front for them at the end of the day, and they're not actually going to be able to side with them if they're actually making their own sort of participants move on with violence and actually attack people at the end of the day. So we're seeing that generally society is not a sort of society that generally moves forward with violence, but it's something that generally leads forward with peaceful actions. So with that actually being said, Chair, I beg to submit.
All right, we thank that speaker for that fine speech. We don't welcome the third speaker of the opposition bench to come and continue the cases for up. So you mention your name and then you come down from 3 to 1 and then you start your speech.
Okay. I request if I'm audible.
Yes, please. If you are audible enough, I'll let you know when you are not at any time.
Okay. My name is Nailah Mbarak, and I'm the third speaker of opposition Shihab pronouns. If you have a POI, feel free to unmute and ask. Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the problem we have with side propositions case is that they fail to prove to us why companies would be incentivized to change. Panel, understand that when they preach about diplomatic means, Panel, we already told you that companies to change is very expensive, right? We told you on an economic spectrum, they argue that, there is means of subsidization and change. But Pano, notice that when companies emit carbon emission, like carbon, on the globe, it's highly more expensive to take up green technology, right? So what incentive do they have to actually, take this up? We don't get any sort of analysis, and we think that this is not the likely case. Fana, why am I going to do in this speech? One, I'm going to handle a few rebuttals and then move on to comparatives and show why in all instances side opposition deserves to win this debate. Fana, in this debate, what do we tell you? From our very first speech, we told you that one, there are a lot of issues that happen right now in society because of what companies have done. That our first speaker came and told you about, heat waves and respiratory issues, right? We tell you that side proposition then, like fairly is unfair with showing exactly how much society has suffered with these current issues, right? It disregards the fact that sustainable memes and the protests and petitions do little to nothing to solve the problems affecting society, right? Situations whereby cities are plagued by cancerous diseases because water supplies are contaminated by big pharma companies, which are less likely to lose if taken to court because of how much political and financial power that they have. But we're telling you that people right now are dying, risking their life every day at a point in time where environmental degradation becomes a life and death situation for not only
UI.
wildlife and land. We tell you that, water security is at its lowest. We stand to support eco-terrorism. I'll take your PI later. One, what do we tell you? On the moral justification, right? Panel, we tell you in our speech that the end justifies the need. Cyber position says that, people are dying, and because these companies have a significant role, it has the public, we therefore need to protect them. But panel, our second speaker comes and tell you that yes, companies are important to society, but one, we tell you that still they need to be held accountable for the damage that they've done to the environment, right? And also, secondly, we have actively showed and talked to them to tell them you're actually written petitions on how much is being polluted, but they have not stopped. There are still oil spills happening in Nigeria. They are still dumping chemicals in rivers and lakes. Why? Because it's cheaper for them. Because it's a lot cheaper than actually finding out better means of disposing of this waste, right? Kano, they are willing to avoid any form of accountability, and therefore they are not incentivized to tackle that problem, because then they would be, they would incur loss in the profits that they make, right? Even if they had the capacity, I beg, because of their selfish interest, they would not want to, partake in this. But partner, what do we tell you also aside opposition? We tell you that not all companies are going to stop working,
UI.
right? We tell you that, I'll take it later. Don't budget. It is because of the greatest damage that these companies have created, some of them, that we are going to hold them accountable to vandalizing. And we tell you how does this work. One, when you project the sort of maximum damage and you challenge these companies that sort of way, why you shed light on the problem. In most cases, people are not exactly aware. I'm talking about in South Africa, people had to be told that they're going through apartheid before they could act upon it. People sometimes don't realize that something bad is happening to them, and therefore they need to have this public display to prove to them that something is wrong and there is need to change. But in a second, we tell you that it actively stops these negative operations. When people become more vigilant of what's happening in society, then they are more likely to report in instances where they notice something wrong that the companies are doing, in forests and farms and lakes. But then also, we tell you that thirdly, it creates situations whereby the problem gains international attention. And this is where it just basically handles the issues of having high political power and financial influence. We tell you that when something gains popularity in an international spectrum, then there is more chances of it actually being solved. This is why we think that at this particular level, we think it's justified. But then also second, right, we tell you that we
UI.
need to have some form of self-preservation. In our second speech, I'll take you later. We tell you that because we need to be able to protect ourselves, environmental degradation and this suffering has literally backed us into our corner, right? But no, we are aware that to take part in a war against maybe people like Napoleon and Hitler, we are aware of the economic impact it would have, right? We are aware that people are going to die. We are aware of all these problems. Well, why do people still go to war? Because they need to have that form of preservation. They need to be able to have a chance or have a say of what happens in their societies. And right now, people are at a loss. Basically their hands are tied, and there's no way for them to actually help themselves, because now society is being controlled and influenced by these big pharma companies and these big oil companies that don't feel the need to actually, be better in how they dispose of their waste. We are telling you that these are reasons why we need to vouch for eco-terrorism, because it helps us. Because in the end, we are able to, shed light on what exactly is the problem. But even on the issue of like negotiation and diplomacy, right? But we also tell you that it has not proven to work, but props still persist. There are still oil spills, and because it's cheaper, they are more incentivized to take it on. But if I continue, PR.
Okay, so you come and you tell us that things like sustainable energy are expensive. Why then do you think that they'd have the incentive to go this route, even at a point in time where you attack them
Because,
and make the
as I've
company worse off?
explained on the mechanism, we have told you how, because they have the problem has international relations, big organizations are likely to come in. For example, the United Nations or NATO. But those companies are people who just want to promote peace and want to help people. If notice that people are dying because they're taking contaminated water, people are falling sick. These are the reasons why, big superpowers, because they're aware of what's happening, they would like it to come in. Because of how much coverage the Palestine-Israeli war is happening, there is a lot of help coming in from Yemen and Turkey and other countries. So apparently we think it's justified even when there is backlash, because it would put, as our second speaker told you, it will put the issue at the forefront. But Pano, what we prove in this debate? One, aside the position, we win because one, we're able to prove to you how morally justified it is and how important it is to have eco-terrorism. But then also second, we prove how urgent. People are dying, as we mentioned right now. We tell you that as society, we need to promote self-preservation, and this is likely possible with eco-terrorism because as we showed you, this was likely the case with like civil rights movement. But Pano, also lastly, we tell you how important, because of the moral responsibility we have for like future generations. When you destroy our planet, Pano, our obligation right now is to ensure that we can promote it for like future generations, ensure that they also have like a safe life. But that is not what side provision supports, and it's for these reasons that you should vote for opposition. I beg to rest.
All right, we thank that speaker for that speech. We then call on the opposition reply speaker to come and give a reply summary speech of the op. Here. So you mention your name and you count down to 3.
Okay, Chair, am I audible?
You are audible.
Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2.
Please, your name.
Oh,
Please
sorry.
start with your name.
Okay. My name is Samrawit, first opposition speaker. Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2. Chair, Affirmative lives in a world where they think talks and talks and talks are going to save the world. We cannot tell you that throughout our speeches that environmental talks and even all the campaigns and stuff have actually ended in discussion rooms, and it's high time to actually enact force in order to actually have change. Chair, today's motion tells us that is it clearly justified or unjust to actually support environmental movements like supporting this eco-terrorism, right? We show you that these goals are justified. We have to understand, Chair, that the actions are acceptable and very beyond okay, because at the end of the day, we achieve best for society. What does Affirmative come and tell us? Affirmative comes and tells us that these corporations at the end of the day gives us a lot of support. It means they give us employment. It means that they generate revenue at the end of the day. We come and tell them from our speeches that we can't risk environment via the whole idea of probably we want to promote employment, right? We show you that the the degradation that these corporations have done towards society is extremely dangerous and extremely bad. My third speaker even gives you the impact that people are drinking contaminated water. They're literally breathing, polluted air that is causing hazardous and detrimental problems in society's life. Yeah, we come and show you, Chair, that the nature of these societies, the nature of these corporations are profit incentive. What does that mean? It means they don't want to hold accountability at a point in time. It means whatever mechanisms they are going to do is going to actually make them, they're going to go for mechanisms that is actually cheap and probably not even, affect their profits at the end of the day. That is why they just go and dump things in that, in water. That is why they just go and cut trees that they're not even accountable for. That is why we think we support these environmental movements that support eco-terrorism, right? But then Chair would come and tell you that it is very urgent and necessary. What does they come and tell us? Affirmative comes and tells us that once you literally act such a way, people are going to, these companies are going to be violent, right? This is literally an assertion and we don't think it's actually correct. Why? Because we give you two reasons. First, we show you that these corporations in and itself know that their actions are wrong because they literally degrade the environment, and for so long environmentalists have actually spoken, right? But then two, from our support and our moral justification, we show you that these companies are going to be forced to find better mechanisms to avoid such backlash again. At a point in time, once we show that people have said enough is enough, we are tired of your pollution, these companies, in order to avoid such incidents of losses and probably to avoid such incidents of arson and vandalism, at a point in time it's going to be they're going to find better mechanisms in order to avoid such backlash that the society is going to probably paint to them, right? So therefore, Chair, we think it is very morally justified at the end of the day. They come and tell us that we want a harm-free environment. Chair, we come and show that these corporations for so long have harmed the environment. They have given various depression, and we see that these eco-terrorists are frustrated. At a point in time, if you don't give me any room to breathe, why would I actually leave you alive? Yeah, why would I actually literally let you slide away? At a point in time, that is what eco-terrorists actually, that's the environment they literally live in. And that is why we think it is very morally justified at the end of the day. And at a point in time, that is from our side of the house, why we think it's morally justified. It's a point in time where it's actually why it's very effective from our side of the house. Yeah. At a point in time, once we have this eco-terrorists or eco-terrorism movements, we see that it's going to be very effective for these people to actually go ahead and find better mechanisms. And that is why we think from our side of the house, we front environmental sustainability at the end of the day. We show you the nature of these corporations. We show you that at a point in time, we don't want, our mentality is not to harm people, but our mentality is to stand and probably go ahead and bring environmental sustainability at the end of the day. And that is why, Chair, from our side, we show it's very urgent, it's very morally justified for their actions. It's going to be very effective, and at the end of the day, we don't think negotiation and diplomacy will work. At the end, will work from anywhere. Yeah, and that's why we think it's a clear opposition win.
We thank that speaker for that fine speech. We then call on the reply speaker of the affirmative to end the debate for us. Here. Your name, and then you count down and start.
Okay, so first, can everyone hear me?
Yes, please. You are audible enough.
Okay. So my name is Adrian, first speaker of Affirmative. And if there's nothing further, I'll open case in 3, 2, 1. So panel, about 30 to 35 minutes ago, we started with this notion or this concession that, okay, look, people are dying, the environment is screwed. But what we get from negative is that the alternative to this is, okay, people are dying, so let's kill more people purely for the plot. And it's okay to then kill more people and destroy buildings and vandalize people simply because you can prove moral justification. I find that in and of itself at base premise level uniquely problematic. But panel, I'll humor their best case, and because panel will show you 3 things and 3 very credential things that assert to the team that wins this debate. One is the team that can prove to you that at a point in time where you have moral justification, you then accrue the benefits of environmental sustainability to the highest degree possible. But then secondly, and more importantly, who then gives these companies an incentive to change? Because panel, they then tell us, but by somehow destroying buildings and destroying pipelines, we somehow make companies now be more environmentally sustainable. But at the same time, throughout their speeches, they run the fact that things like green technology are uniquely expensive. So we posit the POI to them and we tell them, okay, look, why then, if it is more expensive and companies are profit oriented, why do they have the incentive to do it, even at the point where you attack them and you make them worse off? And even if we humor them and we say they would then have the unique incentive to then, have environmentally sustainable ways, why then is it more likely for that to happen at the point in time where you have screwed over that company and you've just given them an alternative which said, oh, okay, we're going to jump ship. Why? Because here we've been attacked. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next. Because panel, we then pose it to you that we already have a spillover effect in status quo, and we think that instead of attacking corporations and not really dealing with the problem of them, the possibility of them jumping ship, the possibility of them being profit oriented, we don't get that at all in any regard from Team Negative. But panel, let me just run the clashes that we get in this debate. We tell you why it is unjustified. So the principle of justification and morality is something that comes up in this debate. Panel will show you why we're more morally justified, purely because negative tell us, okay, violence by all means is uniquely okay, extremism by all means is uniquely okay. But panel will tell you that, sure, you can bust a pipeline and take down a building just to make a statement and to make everyone look nice. But panel will then tell you that that in and of itself is uniquely problematic, because sure, you then get recognized, but then we tell you that one, it harms the public, because the public is directly profiting from these companies. So you screw over the company, you screw over the people that benefit from that company. Second, we then tell you that you're more likely to buy out. Thirdly, we then tell you that they are more likely to get the alternatives. Why? Because they have the ability due to resources, but they have the incentive due to the buying and incentivized to, retain their current status quo just to retain profit and stuff like that. But even thirdly, we then tell you that it is principally unjustified because everyone loses in this regard. Companies lose because why? They are more likely to retaliate. They are more likely to get backlash. You're more likely to have retaliation. People lose out because there's no change. So these companies will just wait it out and pray to God that these people actually come to their right senses and be environmentally sustainable in their practices. But then thirdly, we also tell you that the sentiment fabric, regardless of them saying, oh, you have international community and optics and stuff like that, we then tell you that on our side of the bench, you still get that because you have incentive to prevent backlashes, so to get benefits from the people. So panel, even as I finish, they say that violence is okay, kill everyone for the plot, but we tell you that, okay, look, even though it hasn't worked, we're willing to still run that risk as opposed to screwing everyone over in the end. I rest my case and that of opposition. Thank you very much.
We thank that speaker for that fine speak, and thank everyone for that round. And we'll go and see you all in the quarterfinals. Judges, please, let's move to the adjudicator room and do the deliberations here.